Whenever people criticize credit rating agencies, you tend to hear the same things, right? They're too slow, they're conflicted. But what if I told you there's a much deeper problem? A hidden structural flaw that calls into question the very reason we use these ratings in the first place. Let's get into it.
To really get what's at stake here, you have to start with the sheer, immense power these agencies have. And this quote from Thomas Friedman, look, he's not exaggerating. A simple change in a letter grade, say from a AAA to a AA, can literally trigger economic earthquakes around the world. That's the kind of influence we're talking about.
And all that power comes from one place. They are the gatekeepers to a truly colossal market. Just look at these charts to get a sense of the scale. On the left, you've got the bond market, measured in trillions, and on the right, the stock market, in billions. The bond market is more than 30 times bigger. It is not even close. This is the financial ocean that these agencies are the lifeguards for.
All right, so let's start with the criticism we've all probably heard before. The fact that credit ratings always seem to be playing catch-up with reality.
So the big knock against these agencies, right? It's that they're just slow. They react to things long after everyone else in the market already has. They aren't predicting what's coming. They're basically just confirming what's already happened. And let me tell you, the data on this is just wild.
Let's just look at a few examples here. In these charts, that jagged blue line, that's the market's real-time feeling about a company's risk. The blocky red line, that's the official rating. For companies like Ford and Citigroup, you can see the market starts to panic. That blue line shoots way up, but the official rating, it only changes way, way later. It's like hearing the echo of thunder a full minute after you saw the lightning.
And look, this shows you it's not just a couple of cherry-picked examples. These charts pull together data from thousands of rating changes. Check out the bottom one for downgrades. The market's perception of risk starts climbing for a full 90 days before the official downgrade, which happens at day 0. By the time the agency makes the call, the market has already moved on. The party is over long before the official invitation arrives. But here's the thing. What if this slowness isn't even the real problem?
Okay, this is where things get really interesting. We're going to dive into a much more subtle and, honestly, kind of more disturbing issue. One that gets to the very heart of what a rating even is. Just think about this for a second. How can something be right and wrong at the same time, just depending on who's looking at it? Now, this isn't some kind of riddle. It's actually a concept from philosophy that has massive, and I mean massive, consequences in the world of finance.
The key to unlocking this whole thing lies in a really simple, everyday idea. The amount of proof we need to believe something, well, it changes depending on what's on the line.
Think about it like this. It's the end of the day, you have that vague memory of locking your car, and on a normal day, that's totally fine. You know it's locked. But then a coworker runs in and says, hey, there are people breaking into cars in the parking lot right now. All of a sudden, that vague memory feels completely useless, doesn't it? You have this overwhelming urge to go and physically check the handle. Your evidence, your memory, is exactly the same, but because the stakes just shot through the roof, it's not good enough anymore.
And there's actually a name for this. It's a concept from philosophy called stakes sensitivity. It's a pretty intuitive idea, right? High stakes demand a high standard of proof. And this, right here, is where the entire system of credit ratings starts to fall apart.
Because the stakes for a credit rating agency, a CRA, are in a completely different universe from the stakes of, say, a massive pension fund. For the CRA, if they get a rating wrong, okay, it's bad for their reputation, maybe they get a fine. But for the pension fund that invests based on that rating, we're talking about people's life savings. We're talking about whether or not someone gets to retire. The stakes aren't even in the same ballpark.
So what happens? What's the follow-up when you take a judgment made for low stakes and use it to make a high-stakes decision? Well, you get a catastrophic failure of knowledge. So here is the absolute crucial point. The amount of evidence a rating agency gathers might be perfectly fine for their purposes, for their low stakes. It's enough for them to know the rating. But, and this is the key, that knowledge, that justification, doesn't just magically transfer over to the high-stakes pension fund. The fund needs a much, much higher bar of certainty, and the agency's rating just doesn't clear it.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract theory. This had devastating real-world consequences. Just look at UBS before the 2008 financial crisis. They bought up mountains of complex debt products, all of them stamped with that golden AAA rating. They assumed it was as safe as it gets. And for the rating agency's low stakes, their evidence was, arguably sufficient. But for UBS, with billions of dollars on the line, it was nowhere near enough. The result? A $19 billion loss in a single year.
Now here's the final twist that makes this whole situation so incredibly dangerous. You might be thinking, well, why don't these big funds just ignore the ratings? And here's the kicker. They can't. They are often legally required to use them. For decades, regulations have basically given these ratings the force of law, forcing these high-stakes investors to rely on a judgment that was only ever good enough for low stakes.
So this blows the whole thing wide open, right? It presents a fundamental challenge to the very people who built and continue to maintain this system. It forces us to ask if the whole structure is built on sand.
So the whole problem, the core argument, really just breaks down into three simple claims. 1, the stakes between the agencies and investors are totally out of whack. 2, because of that, the knowledge behind a rating doesn't actually transfer from one to the other. And 3, this isn't some tiny academic issue. These failures have massive, tangible impacts on the real world. Which leaves us with this one final and absolutely critical question. We've seen that credit ratings aren't just slow. They seem to have a deep philosophical flaw baked right into their DNA because of these mismatched stakes. So, knowing that, should we really continue to have a system where these flawed judgments are given the force of law?